What's up everyone and welcome back to another Dark and Darker video. Today I'll be sharing a collection of helpful tips for fighter mains that are struggling to win fights against other players in the dungeons. I've seen other guides covering specific builds and focusing heavily on numbers. This is not one of those videos. The main goal of this video is to focus more on strategy rather than build sets. We're going to go over a handful of PvP encounters and analyze the outcome, going over what went right and what went wrong. I'll also be providing some other helpful tips that worked for me as someone who solely plays fighter. So with that, I hope you all learned something new, and let's get right into the video. We're going to start off by playing each clip in its entirety before analyzing. The first clip is against a wizard during one of my Dark and Darker streams. That's a warlock. All right, let's see what I can do, guys. Let's see what I can do. Oh, that's a wizard. That's not a warlock. So that was a pretty good, straightforward encounter. In terms of takeaways from the clip, really important to remember doorways are a death trap depending on the class you're fighting. In this case, range definitely has the advantage here. So if the wizard was a little bit closer, he could have definitely outplayed me from the doorway. I end up stepping back to hold the advantage with range, equipping any sort of equipment that can give me an edge during the fight, which is why I was grabbing the throwing knives before starting the fight. I don't hear any movement, so I assume that the other player is running away, and I go through the doorway at that point. I notice him as I walk through, so I start from range to get some early damage off. The wizard starts pushing me after they use their lightning strike ability, which was a huge mistake on their part, given that fighters excel in close range against wizards. So ultimately, he ended up dying at the end of the fight. This second clip is against a different wizard shortly after that first fight. Fuck. So in terms of takeaways from this clip, again, keeping in mind that doorways are a death trap, I'm trying to keep the wizard in that doorway as long as possible, peeking the corner with my bow and taking shots when possible. The wizard ends up using haste and invisibility to try and close the distance and get through the doorway, which is a very smart move on his part. At this point though, I end up controlling the pacing. So I'm taking a gamble, I'm pushing in early instead of trying to keep that distance and getting the first hit in. My first hit lands, but the wizard was running a staff that could two-shot me given that I have no headgear. My mistake at this point was not trying to parry his attack, which, you know, 2 shots on the head from the staff, I'm dead. So biggest takeaway there is, and you'll see this as a recurring theme for all of you longsword players, make sure you're practicing your parries at all times. This next clip is against a rogue just before extracting. One thing I want to call out is to just keep an eye on the exchange from range versus melee fighting in this clip. This guy's gonna die. So before we get into the takeaways, one tip I want you all to remember is think of Dark and Darker as a game of chess. You know, your positioning of pieces on a chessboard, it's similar to your positioning in the dungeon. So whether you're in close range, long range, whether you have high ground or low ground, whether you're hiding behind corners or pillars, using your environment to your advantage, all of that plays into the PvP encounters in the rest of these clips, and especially in this one. So getting right into the takeaways, I'm keeping spacing in mind and drawing my bow out to play at range. Again, with rogues, they need to be in closer range in order to do any sort of significant damage. In this case, the rogue actually had a hand crossy, so I can't stay at range the whole time against him, but I'm going to start off in range just to poke at him and to test how reactive he is. This is also a perfect example, again, of just using the terrain around me to my advantage. So I'm peeking around the column here and using it to bait a incoming bolt. At this point, I could have either pushed up and close the distance or continue to fight at range. You can also use it to increase or close distance when out of sight. The rogue does exactly that by going invisible and closing the distance for a few hits right as I bring my bow out. Because the distance is so close, I'm quickly transitioning to longsword. And again, practice your parry, it saved me in this instance, which allowed me to walk away from the fight. Continuing on with the theme of practice, 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 this next clip is going to show you just how important it is to practice your parrying. Oh, hey man. No, 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 no. See, I put my bow away, and I just wanted to go to the center. Okay, you're not friendly. I get it. That's fine. So in terms of takeaways, we have a mirror matchup between two longsword fighters. I start off by playing at range in the doorway just to try and get a few shots off and do some damage. After lighting a shot, he uses sprint to try and close the distance, at which point I turn around and switch to longsword since he's going to be closing the gap. And I also use sprint just in case I need to chase or run away. Here we got a huge parry on my end. Even though he's able to get damage on me, my damage output is way higher and giving me the advantage. This clip is a perfect example of a fighter that ends up practicing and incorporating parries when they're fighting players and somebody who doesn't. Later on in the video, you'll see the inverse of this, but let's move on to the next clip. But before that, I wanted to highlight this next tip to keep in mind, which I'm sure is used in a bunch of other extraction type games. Not every battle needs to be fought. You'll see what I'm talking about in a minute here. I also have some of my own commentary that I was recording live, which I'll let play out at the end. It's not worth fighting this, man. Let's get out of here. It's not worth it. Yeah, so I think in that instance, you guys, like, could I have kept the fight on? Sure. Problem is, he's gonna keep healing with chicken, and he'll poke me. Eventually, I'll run out. I need to do like consistent damage to him. It's just, it's hard when he has a lot of sustain. So in that instance, you got to pick and choose your fights, you know? So I decided, you know, if he was not that good of a like druid player, then sure, like I would keep the fight going. But if it's an even match, or if he's better, which he was really good, I'm going to just piece the fuck out, dude. I'll take the dub, get the money, get out of there. So in terms of takeaways, not much else to say in this one other than you got to be careful to bait the bear attack before fighting in melee distance. Throughout that entire fight, I made sure to keep my distance, shooting arrows whenever possible, and after the bear attack animation starts, I make sure to create distance to avoid getting hit. I'd really only go in during the panther jump or if the druid switches to chicken, but again, keeping in mind that he's probably going to switch to bear at that point, you need to be able to get out of the danger zone quickly. And again, it's always important to consider whether to keep the fight going or to back away and cut your losses. If you're stuck in a long fight with an opponent, you'll always run the risk of getting third-partied. Sometimes winning a fight is also knowing when it makes sense to walk away and safely extract. This is the last clip in the video where I have an honorable duel against a longsword fighter player. This clip really highlights that just because you're outputting the most damage early on in the fight doesn't necessarily mean the fight is over or in your favor. You want to have an honorable duel?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's duel. Ah, he got me. There it is. Only a couple takeaways here. First, a lot of good Dark and Darker players that use the longsword really do capitalize on that thrust attack to open up. It's a lot harder to parry and it gives you more versatility on where you're landing your shots as well. Consider using the thrust attack to test your opponent out. That way you can see, are they going to parry you if you do an attack? And how would they react if you attack them? Are they going to step away? Are they going to lean into an attack? This is a great tool in any fighter's toolkit. And again, I didn't rely on parrying since I got 2 early hits off, and the other fighter was able to get just 1 parry, and that's GG for the fight. Again, guys, always practice your parries if you're running longsword. It's incredibly powerful, and you don't want to miss out on all that extra damage. And with that, we've reached the end of the video. I hope you all enjoyed and maybe learned something new. If you did, please consider leaving a like and subscribe to the channel for more Dark and Darker content. YouTube thinks you'll probably like this next video on screen. Go check it out, but before you do, put down a helpful tip of your own down in the comment section below for new fighters to learn from. Thanks again, and I'll see you all in the next one.